Welcome to the Sleep is a Skill podcast. My name is Molly McLaughlin, and I own a company that optimizes sleep through technology, accountability, and behavioral change. Each week, I'll be interviewing world-class experts ranging from doctors, innovators, and thought leaders to give actionable tips and strategies that you can implement to become a more skillful sleeper. Let's jump into your dose of practical sleep training. Welcome to the Sleep is a Skill podcast. I can't wait to share with you my third episode with Brilli, a company that is on a mission to provide healthy home lighting specifically for your circadian rhythm. So a little backstory, I recorded this episode a few months back, but in light of this historical time, I knew that I had to release it now that we suddenly find ourselves in an unprecedented time in history where so many of us are suddenly inside more than we really ever have been before to practice social distancing. So what is that doing to our circadian rhythm and our sleep? Our guests on this episode will really shed some light, pun intended, on this topic. So the first person is Dr. Doug Steele, a neuroscientist and translational scientist. Dr. Doug Steele has spent the last decade studying the effects of lighting on living organisms and translating his findings into practical applications and phototherapies. He has extensively studied the convergence of tunable LED lighting technology to understand non-visual neural pathways from eye to brain and has received training in medical sciences and neuroscience, theoretical and applied biotechnology, integrative neuroscience, and brain environment interactions. He holds a PhD in Biomedical Sciences from Columbia University and is currently the founder and chief scientific officer of NeuroSense. Also, my guest Jill Sherman is chief marketing and digital officer of Brilli. So Jill Sherman has spent much of her career creating and launching award-winning brands in the beauty, wellness, and lifestyle sectors. She joined Lucidity Lights in 2019 to apply her deep understanding of the consumer to help develop and launch the Brilli brand, the first light offering the widest spectrum of well-being benefits without sacrificing light quality or energy efficiency. Prior to this role, she served as Global Vice President of Marketing at Patchology, Senior Vice President of Social Strategy at Digitas, and Vice President of Marketing at Tria Beauty. In 2017, she was awarded Top Women in Digital for Strategy by Synopsis Media. Today, we have the Brilli team joining us, and I, for one, am very, very excited to dive in with them. Today, we have Jill Sherman and Dr. Doug Steele. And guys, I'm really excited and grateful that you were able to make time in your busy schedules to talk about light and sleep.
Happy to be here.
So excited to be here. Thanks, Molly.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. Yeah, so number one, I would love if we could take a minute to just really start at the beginning and start at the basics and hear your take on, and maybe Dr. Doug Steele, maybe this might be your area of expertise. If you could just paint a picture for us of almost Light 101 and why this is important, particularly in the area of sleep optimization.
Sure. Well, sleep is an essential function for humans, and I think we tend to think of it as a nuisance or a convenience. But the origins of sleep go all the way back to the very most primitive organisms. So even bacteria have periods of activity and periods of inactivity. And some of the most primitive organisms that display a sensitivity to light were very, very ancient sandworms that would lie under the sand, and when they detected sunlight or darkness, they would come up out of the sand to feed and then go back under the sand. So sleep is coupled with another essential process, which is that of alertness and awakeness and attention. So the two are separate but very intimately connected. So one part of the sleep story that I think we'll get to is it's not only about our need for sleep and the quality of sleep, but it has a direct impact on our attention span and our alertness during the day. So sleep isn't just about sleep. It's about how awake we are, and then how well we're able to attend to everything in our world, like job responsibilities, family relationships, and everything else. Sleep is also an underlying contributing factor to just about every kind of health disorder or issue. And what's really interesting is a lot of the chronic health problems we see today, things like high blood pressure, diabetes, sensitivity to things like rheumatoid arthritis, the chronic conditions that we're affected by, almost all of them have a sleep component or a circadian component. And so depression is another one, and mental illness. So sleep isn't just about the amount of time we spend with our head on a pillow. It's really tied to our integrated daily health experience.
Oh my God, that's so all a comprehensive look at the importance of light and how it affects even, the smallest of creatures, and can kind of have this ripple effect into virtually all areas of our health and well-being. And it just really has you pause and get connected to the importance of light in a different way. So I really thank you for painting that picture. And so considering we're at a time when, sleep deprivation rates are, really at a high and projected to be rising in the future, what do you see as one of the main problems as it relates to the lighting that we're dealing with, or the light exposure that the average person has throughout their day? And so what, in your opinion, what is the biggest problem that they're facing as they are looking to improve their light exposure and to improve their sleep?
Yeah. First of all, this problem isn't something that's affected human beings for thousands or millions of years. This is a very recent phenomenon.
Yes.
We only developed problems with sleep relating to light with the invention of the electric light bulb. Up until then, we lived in synchrony with the sun and the moon. We did things by candlelight or by fire, but none of those disrupted our circadian patterns. And what's happened is lifestyle and the busyness with which we're engaged in our day, mapping things out, has made sleep just one more thing to be slotted or scheduled. Right. And another issue with that, with sleep not being taken as a critical process, it's sort of considered an optional one, is that as a result of our lifestyles of constant engagement, constant processing of information, we're developing what's called cognitive overload. And what that means is we're bombarded with facts and information and impressions and communications. And through use of things like social media now, we're preoccupied with what is our standing in the social hierarchy? What does this person think of me? And you might wonder, well, what does that have to do with sleep? Well, it turns out when we go to bed, all of that cognitive overload is running like a hamster on a running wheel in our head. And if we can't still our minds and relax and decompress, then we really have trouble falling asleep, and it also affects the depth of our sleep. So sleep is about the essential role, restorative role of returning our bodies to a ready state for the following day, but it's also about a lifestyle and a lifestyle change and how light contributes as part of an overall wellness strategy for us.
So interesting. Now, your company, and so I know both, and Jill, you might have some take on this too, but your company is looking to kind of help fill the void in the current optionality around our indoor lighting kind of dilemma. And
Yes.
right. And so, and I love your website, by the way. You do such a great job of kind of painting the picture of a bit of what the current problem is, just the practical application of this and what you guys are offering to help solve, not solve this problem. This still has to be something that we all have to be mindful of, but to help in a way that's really unique and outside of the current consumer market. So I was wondering if, either one of you could touch on this, but what is missing in the current lighting that is available? If the stats are right, that it looks like the average American is largely indoors, in these alarming numbers. Some of the numbers point to supposedly, over 90% of their days are spent inside. But even despite the percentages, we can all make the assumption that a lot of us are spending an inordinate amount of time inside. So if that is true, then our indoor lighting becomes so very important. So what is not working about the current light sources, and what does Brilli help bring in to this conversation?
So, Doug, maybe I'll start with the basics and then I'll hand it off to you. So something Doug sort of talked about earlier was this idea that our circadian rhythm is about 24-hour cycles, and that it's not just the light that we're exposed to here and there, but it's the light we're exposed to all the time. If you imagine the sun from sunrise to sunset, it's, those color points and intensities are changing, every millisecond, right? And so we're then sitting indoors under light that doesn't change, right? It's
right.
Most likely tuned for energy efficiency. All of the energy is in the blue spectrum. And that's the light that we wake up to, that we sit under all day, and that we go to sleep to. And the body is screaming, I need more, right? This isn't working for me. And so all of those amazing circadian cues that you would get from living outdoors, when you're waking up to artificial light, and then you're sitting on the subway, and then you're sitting in an office, and then you're sitting in a car, and then you're home, all of those circadian cues go away. And so much of our physiology is linked to light cues. And, we have become a population that just thinks of light as a commodity. It's just something that you flip on. But the nuances to a light spectrum, the nuances to color and chromaticity and lumens, all of these things, think of it like a vitamin, right? There's a million different types of vitamins that you can get. And the same goes for light, right? There's a lot of things that can be good in light if it's tuned properly. That can, pull some of the wellness benefits of sunlight, daylight sun, evening sun. But that's not how light is tuned. Most light is tuned to be energy efficient and to turn on and off, and to meet the manufacturer's lifetime warranty date. So we have proposed that the population sort of rethink their relationship with time and light and their circadian rhythm, and basically swap out the light in your home with light that's really more in tune with your biology and with your circadian rhythm, so that, this isn't light therapy where you put your face up against a little light lamp for 20 minutes a day. This is the light that you live with. This is the light that you wake up to, the light that you have lunch with, the light that you go to sleep to. And the idea here is that you're giving your body the circadian cues that it needs throughout the day to optimize daytime activity, both, brain and physiology, as well as help your body sort of naturally move into a state where the brain activity starts to slow, the physical activity starts to slow, and the body knows that it's time to start to naturally prepare for sleep.
Wow.
Did I get that, Doug?
Yeah.
Yeah. Doug, do you want to shed any more light? Puns?
Yeah, a couple of things. We haven't gotten into the science of this, and basically, when we think of the eyes, we think of vision. Light is entering our eyes, and its purpose is to help us see things. Well, about 20 years ago, it was discovered that the eyes have a completely separate, unique function. There are special receptors in the eye that are particularly sensitive to certain kinds of blue light, and this pathway in the brain has nothing to do with vision. Instead, it goes to the part of our brain that sort of sets the master clock for the circadian rhythm in every tissue and organ in our body.
Yes.
And so light is the main time setter for our daily rhythm. And it not only sets it on a daily basis, but in fact, and our brain have about a 3-day memory of previous light exposure. And so this 3-day history combined with daily exposure is what contributes directly to our quality of sleep, our quality of awakeness and alertness, as well as in training circadian rhythm. So one thing I'll say is the very first approaches to this were to provide the right spectrum of light at the right time of day. And so the idea was to provide high-intensity blue in the early part of the day. And the high-intensity blue exerts a very strong effect on our body. But the problem is that visually it can be unpleasant. Blue is very harsh. Colors aren't rendered well. So if you put a high blue content light bulb in your kitchen or dining room, and first thing in the morning you're blasting yourself with blue, and you look down at your cereal or your plate of eggs, the colors are just going to look really unnatural. It's going to look really unappetizing. So what happens is people may want to use a high blue content light for sleep and circadian purposes, but it just isn't pleasant. It's uncomfortable. Right. So I think what we're now seeing is the second and even third generation lighting products being developed by Brilli, in which color quality and color rendering are given equal priority with the actual spectral blue content of the light. So as a result, you can think of it as that the blue is sort of hiding in plain sight in these Brilli products, but the color rendering of artwork on the wall or your peas and carrots on a dinner plate still look really, really good. And so as a result, people are more likely to use products like that for a long period of time, as opposed to the what I'd call the cheap or bad blue. These might be the things you buy at a local home improvement store, where people will actually unscrew them after a couple of weeks because it just makes their homes look awful.
Yes. Right. And that's a big part of this whole conversation is, applicability, like ensuring that people will really make this a regular thing,
Right. If they don't use it, then you're not getting a benefit.
Right. Exactly.
And the inverse to what Doug was just talking about is our light for evening is the opposite, right? It's richer in other parts of the spectrum, but we remove the blue light because that's the part of the spectrum that suppresses melatonin, and you don't want that at night.
Right.
But we've also, made the light not just, sleep aligned, but we've also made it beautiful. So it's light that you also want to live with in the evening, to Doug's point. It's not just loaded with, red and yellow. You don't want to walk into like the den of hell. You want to walk into a house that feels warm and cozy.
Yes, I love that quote of the podcast. That is amazing. Yeah, no, and believe me, that really resonates with me because I've been having a hard sell of, because, I'll be pretty extreme and I'll be talking to, clients and they're really pushing for post sunset. We want candlelit. We want, red light, and we want all these things. And there are just times when that does not work. In the modern day world, you have friends coming over, you got dinner, you got things. And there's a need to also have what you're speaking about of the optionality, having a kind of just a beautiful environment that's also pulling for your health and well-being at the same time. So that's really, really important. So I guess just scoop back for a little too, because I love some of the points that you just made, Doug, of, some of the science of this, some of the importance of how this, again, does impact, every cell in our body. And is this true? And I'm almost just curious to get your take on, would you be aligned with this concept? Because I love it how you called Brilli almost kind of this, second and third generation of optionality around light. And, just that this concept that there is something new kind of on the horizon. to be offered of really overhaul in the way we think about light and how it's been versus how it will be. And the question I had was, there's a few theories that I've read about around different, for so many years, of course, since Edison and, incandescence, that, we were certainly exposed to this kind of non-native lighting that now, has shifted and changed our daily schedules to elongate them and to bring them more into the nighttime. And some of my reading around the difference between incandescence and LEDs being that with incandescence, that there was, so much more of a red light source there. And then as we began, in the 80s and 90s, shifting over as a society a bit more to these energy efficient lights and LEDs, that the spectrum of blue really shifted to much more blue, rich, blue heavy and fluorescence. And there's a particular theory around that even coinciding with added sleep deprivation rates. Do you agree with that? And do you think that now, so your product would then also help alleviate that problem, because suddenly we're changing this spectrum, this kind of rainbow of colors that's offered in your light product?
Yeah, that's a good question. There's a lot there.
There's a lot there. I know. I tend to really do that. Sorry, I throw like five.
No. It's fine. So the first LEDs that were ever invented were actually blue LEDs. Mm-hmm. And the way that you got color out of a blue LED was to use a collection of phosphors, or little sparkly particles that when they're hit with blue light, these phosphors then re-emit light at a different part of the spectrum. So they get hit with blue and they emit green, or they emit yellow. And what's happened is, since the days of the first LEDs, which were all blue, now we actually have true, authentic mint, amber, red, lime green, cyan, royal blue, purple, many different colors. And, those are being used to great effect in the theatrical industry, where almost all theatrical lighting now is tuned LED with rich spectral content. So what's happening now is what had been advanced technology is now migrating down into products that can be used in the home. So the number of choices a manufacturer has to mix and match LEDs as well as the phosphors that create secondary colors just gives you an artist's palette. And what's really funny is Brilli is sort of like a test kitchen, where, in a normal test kitchen with Rachel Ray, you might go in and she'd say, sample these 5 chicken cacciatoris and tell me which one you like. Well, Brilli does the same thing with light and light emitters. They have light boxes, LEDs, phosphors, and they create different mixes. They come up with the hard numbers of, the characteristics, but they also do a lot with personal preference and individual preference. So what I will say about the LEDs and the blue content, yes, LEDs contain a higher blue content than an incandescent bulb, but you can also use them in ways that minimize that blue. And everything that's in the spectrum of an LED, regardless of whether it's high blue or low blue, is also found in natural sunlight. Natural sunlight probably has 10,000 to 100,000 fold more high energy blue than a blue LED. So there's no aspect of blue light that makes it inherently dangerous. Mm-hmm. It's simply that people don't like using it. And I think one thing I'll also say about this is I mentioned, that this non-visual pathway was discovered about 20 years ago. Well, what happened was everybody went running to the scientists saying, what light should I use? What light? And the scientists were saying, well, use this high blue in the morning and use low blue at night. Well, the scientists were answering the question of what is the body going to respond to? They're not equipped to answer the question of what are people going to prefer. Preference is a psychological quality. It's a consumer usage quality. It's a marketing quality. And so it wasn't until the science actually trickled down and got translated into home products that we really reached a point where these products had high aesthetic value and high use.
Wow, there's a lot there. That was incredible. So now, for instance, with Brilli, because now there's starting to be some of these smart lights coming on to into the conversation, and for the last few years there was some that you can link up to your phone and can do this, that, or the other at your will to shift to the rainbow colors. Anything that you want in your space, you can start to bring that in. So it's kind of becoming this new optionality. How, just painting a picture of a day in the life, how would something like Brilli, maybe automate or remove the questions of how to then shift our light in a way that will support and pull for this health and well-being? So you wake up, and how do we use Brilli? Is it just sort of automated in the background? What is it? How does the whole system kind of look?
Sure. So we have basically 3 product lines. We've got a charge up, which is your daytime spectrum. And the light has been intricately tuned to work for your daytime circadian rhythm. And then come evening or sundown, we have wind down. And that spectrum has been tuned for relaxation and to help your body naturally prepare for sleep. And the idea of those bulbs is, there are rooms that we use primarily for daytime and primarily for nighttime. And they can be placed in those specific rooms. So I have wind down in my bedroom. I have charge up in my home office. But for rooms that have shared use, right? These are rooms that I use day and night. Living room, kitchen. We actually have tunable downlights and fixtures that you can go from one end of the spectrum to the next. So you would dial up in the morning for your daytime spectrum. You would move to the center for the afternoon, and then you would move all the way down for evening. So it gives you the sort of full sun-up, sundown experience. And, there's a lot to love about a lot of these lamps that allow you to do, violets and greens. We don't have lights like that because those parts of the spectrum aren't really providing a health and wellness benefit or a circadian benefit. Those are really just fun. And we don't knock them because they're a lot of fun, and a lot of us have those types of lights as well, for ambience. But really, to get the health and wellness benefit, we're just looking at tuning the light specifically around circadian health. So you put a Brilli bulb or a fixture in your home, and the light is tuned specifically for health and wellness.
I think part of the rationale behind that is, again, like Jill, I'm a fan of the tunable products, and sometimes I like to tune a light behind the sofa in violet and do a nice backlighting. But a lot of times I don't feel like being theatrical. If I've had a busy day and I'm managing my Fitbit on my smartphone and 10 other devices, then tuning the light becomes a chore. It's another app. It's another thing. And, kudos to people that really get into micromanaging their light. But a lot of us just want to know we have the right light at the right time. And, Brilli is taking, in a way, it's taking the tuning, the manual decision-making away. You have the option with other Brilli products of doing some tuning. But, this is designed to just integrate into a wellness lifestyle.
So well said. Yeah. I mean, so part of the structure of this company of Sleep is a Skill, I'll be working with different clients in small groups, and the amount of lighting questions that I end up getting when clients begin to take this topic seriously, it's, and they're tired, they, to pull this in and to make it seamless, it can really occur for people is just overwhelming. When you really start dialing in, oh my God, there's different lighting in my office versus, how much light am I supposed to get in the morning? getting sunlight, does that impact things? Some will be trying light boxes, and wants to know the proper number of lux that they should be getting exposed to. I mean, there's just so many things that if there are more options out there that can remove all of those questions and cognitive overload, as we were discussing, I think that's really, really exciting. So from that place, so I'm curious then, as far as I would love it, maybe Doug, if you could maybe provide some wisdom or knowledge on this topic. If there's this idea partly around the ratio of our light that we're exposed to, of getting a proper amount of light exposure during the day to kind of anchor our circadian rhythm versus the light that we're exposed to in the evening. And, so say the difference between if you've been out on a beach and you're getting tons of light exposure throughout the day, then the, maybe more nominal, or the amount of blue light that you're getting in the evening arguably wouldn't impact your sleep quite as much, versus if you're just sort of inside, not, being attuned to this lighting topic, and you're kind of in the dark, and then you turn on a flood of lights in the evening, that ratio gets a little messed up and your body has a bit of a confusion on the time of day. Could you help kind of clarify for us how that works, the impact that has on our body? And yeah, please.
So there's a couple of ideas here. So for one is what we call circadian health, which is getting our bodies in tune. And true, accurate circadian tuning is really difficult because there's a lot of light and other environmental factors that we don't have control over. So if you're in an airport, you don't have control over the lighting in the airport, but you're exposed to it. So for actual circadian entrainment, you pretty much have to be in a laboratory environment where everything is controlled. But the good news is, if you get the pattern right for normalizing sleep and awakeness, then your circadian rhythm tends to be in good sync. So the rule of thumb, the hard and fast rule, is the number one preferred lifestyle is we're all living outside exposed to sunlight, right, or in a windowless house. There's nothing that's better than sunlight in terms of intensity, spectrum, time of day, duration of exposure, all of that. But the problem is most of us don't live outside. So right, we have to recreate it indoors as well as we can. So what are the essential features of light exposure during the day? Okay, starting in the morning, it's important to get at least 20 minutes of high blue content light. So this would be a brightly lit room that will boost your cortisol release, which is a hormone that contributes to awakeness and alertness. And having that exposure first thing in the morning is what really sends a signal to your body, okay, this is the rhythm we're in. And then over the course of the day, you can diminish the amount of blue a bit, you can change the intensity, and it won't have that big an effect on your sleep that night. The important thing is, after 5 or 6 p.m., you want to start exposing yourself to light with low blue content. And in the 2 to 3 hours before your bedtime, your absolute bedtime is less important than the fact that you're exposed to low intensity, low blue content light in the 2 to 3 hours before you fall asleep. Mm-hmm. And that's the ideal solution. Of course, we sabotage that by looking at tablets and smartphone screens that do contain a lot of blue, and there are apps to cancel out some of the blue in those devices. But with those bookends of high blue in the morning, low blue at night, you're basically setting yourself up for good sleep. Now, I'd like to address something else for a minute, and that is please. Alertness and awakeness and attention span. So if during the day we've had poor quality sleep at night, then one of the benefits of high blue content light is we can use it throughout the day to give ourselves a boost or a perk up. So we can increase the amount of blue and the intensity of the light to give us bursts of increased attention. And if we've slept poorly the night before, then all of the efforts to give ourselves a boost simply bring us to a point of keeping us awake. We're not really able to exceed a normal level of attention. Whereas if we have normal sleep, throughout the day, we can take advantage of high blue content to overcome the post-lunch dip. So if we're working on a report or a project, we can actually increase the amount of blue for a period of time between, let's say, 10 minutes and an hour or an hour and a half to actually increase our focus and our productivity during the day. But we can only get that bump if we have good baseline sleep. Otherwise, all of the efforts of the body during the day are going to just keeping us awake.
Right. That's such a good point. I love how you called it, getting a boost or a perk up from light. It's such an interesting, idea for many people that haven't considered of, just the physiological response that can come from light to that degree and using it strategically. I think that's so important. And to your point around ensuring that you have that foundational amount of sleep to really use it to its max capacity. Yeah, that's very, very important. And so with that, this is something where, do you envision this to be for where you see this idea going? Do you see that this is something where you would love to see this in hospitals, where you would love to see this as, something to really help facilitate, general health and well-being for people that, really just because of system, whether they're shift workers or they're sick or what have you, they're not able to get outside, or the average person that, is largely just inside, regardless, that this could really make a real difference in some of these numbers that we're seeing of, chronic and persistent health problems?
Yeah, what you're getting into now is addressing other markets. So first of all, the focus with Brilli has really been on wellness, integrating into a wellness lifestyle for people who are living in normal residential environments. And in the future, Brilli may get into other categories of products, but to address some of what you've brought up, first of all, as regards shift work is probably the toughest nut to crack in this area. You really need specialized knowledge of how to do it. There's a number of studies going on right now in this. I'm happy to say that looking in my crystal ball, I know of 3 specific technologies that are in development by really hardcore therapeutic science companies to address shift work. So I think we'll crack that nut in coming years. Hospitals, ironically, are probably the toughest environment to address, and there are a couple of reasons for it. First of all, somebody has to be responsible for choosing the light, tuning it, turning it off and on, assessing patient outcome. Whose job is that? The patient isn't going to do it. The family isn't going to do it. Doctors and nurses are busy. They're not going to do it. So there's no way to integrate healthy lighting into a hospital practice. Where I think the real market potential is once you get released from a hospital, especially with the increasing the trends in healthcare, you're going to be released to a home health environment.
Right.
You're going to see already hospitals doing much more extended care and telemedicine in the home. That's where recovery is going to take place. And I think that this sort of scientifically based lighting is ideally suited for recovery in the home. I think where we're at on the knowledge curve is we know enough about the science to apply it to everyday environments, but the specialized environments like shift work, like hospitals. Another one are factory floors.
Sure.
You want people to be relaxed but vigilant on a factory floor. You don't want the error rate to go up, but you don't want to be throwing their biological rhythms out of whack. So we aren't able to address everything, but we have a good handle on a lot of it.
Oh, so that's really well said. Thank you for that. And to be able to bring this into, the average person's home is super exciting. So say someone invests in this and they bring this in, what can they anticipate as some potential benefits, and how long does it take to start to see the difference? I love what you said about, kind of this 3-day memory within our bodies of our light exposure. How long does it take to start to notice a change?
Yeah, well, that can be answered in a few different ways. So there's the physiological answer, which is how long does it take your body to respond? And then there's the psychological response, which is how quickly do I respond to a change in the environment? So the psychological effect is almost immediate. I mean, it's as soon as you screw in that bulb or wire in that product, you'll see a benefit. It depends on what your baseline health level is. If you're basically healthy, then and you have good activity levels, you get exercise regularly, then I'd say 3 days is about the length of time, because at that point your light memory is established. For other kinds of work indoors, it might take longer. But those are sort of the bookends.
Yeah, and I noticed on your website you mentioned about, not as a blanket, like, yes, this will help with headaches, but it does kind of point to that can be a response for some people, that they've noticed that can alleviate some of those regular, chronic. I have a lot of clients that complain of that throughout the day they'll have these headaches. Of course, dealing with sleep deprivation, but also with some of the lighting that they're exposed to, whether it's fluorescent or just some of these harsh lighting environments. Is that something that Brilli also can help address?
Yes. Headaches induced by light can be due to a number of things. It can be due to a person being sensitive to a particular wavelength or part of the spectrum. It can be due to flicker coming from a bulb or a light. It can be due to glare. And all of those factors have been taken into account with the entire Brilli product line. It was part of the criteria that were laid down as sort of non-negotiable in the design of the product. Jill, you want to say anything more about that?
No, to that point, going into this venture, thinking about, how do you create the best wellness lighting, we figured that we weren't going to just address circadian rhythm, but think about the entire person. So what other wellness benefits do we need to consider? And definitely eye strain, headaches caused by indoor lighting, all of those things were definitely specced out as criteria for the lineup.
Awesome. Well said. So actually, Doug, while we have you, it's so exciting to have, someone to cue in from a neuroscience perspective as well. And I was wondering if you could explain a bit more about why we want to avoid that flicker and what that does to our brains, and a little bit more on that, because I know that's a big area.
It's a tough area of study, but I think the leading school of thought is that within the brain, there's a lot of signals being conveyed from one part of the brain to the other. And in some cases, you have signals that are going from point A to point B, and B to C, and C to D, and D to E, and E goes back to A. So you get these little circuits of circular signaling. And what happens with flicker is a couple of things. First of all, flicker at certain frequencies can actually reinforce some of these circular circuits. So they get, instead of so that the brain becomes fixated on these circuits and they amplify. So it's like a spinning wheel and it spins faster and faster, and flicker makes it harder to put a brake on it. So what can result from this is, in extreme cases, it can trigger epilepsy, but for other people, it can trigger obsessive thoughts or ideas that you can't get out of your head. You become fixated on things.
Wow.
And that flicker seems to act as an irritant that can trigger mental fixation. And then you can break that pattern with modulating the intensity and the color of light over time in a way that sort of mimics natural daylight. And then the other reason that flicker is harmful is because our eyes are constantly trying to readjust to the brightness in the environment. So the pupil gets larger and smaller. And there's a lot of the neural processes involved in control of that. And when you're exposed to flicker, you're asking the brain to readjust on a millisecond basis to differences in light intensity. And it overwhelms the brain's ability to figure out what's going on.
Wow.
And actually, there is a natural equivalent to this, too. It's called pixelization. So if you, let's say, are walking or riding a bike in a park, and the sun is filtering through the trees, and you have shadows cast by some of the leaves, and you get an irregular pattern that's being projected onto the sidewalk, a combination of bright spot and shadow, that combined with the speed of walking or riding a bike can actually cause something called pixelization that has the same effect as flicker. It's like nature's equivalent of flicker.
Wow.
And so that's there have actually been some lawsuits filed by people who fell off their bicycles in a park because they said that there was too much pixelization.
No way. That's wild.
So this is something that, just as an aside, outdoor lighting manufacturers now take that into account when they're doing park lighting. And the National Park Service is also looking at it.
Oh my God, that's really interesting. Some of those things, very eye-opening. More puns on this episode.
And the other thing too about flicker and headache in general is that, so headache can have many different causes. It can be due to a constriction in the blood vessels in your brain. It can be due to a high concentration of nitrites or sulfites. So a lot of bagged vegetables, like the salad bags, are treated with sulfites to keep the leafy vegetables green, and that can trigger migraines in some people. And it turns out that light quality appears to be involved in the pain response to these different causes of headache trigger. So I think we're probably 5 to 10 years away from having lighting solutions that address that.
Wow, that's awesome. Yeah, I've heard some interesting, but kind of confusing recommendations for people around that complain of this light sensitivity. Too much light gives them headaches, and that counterintuitively for many is the idea that what is actually needed is more light exposure. Do you agree with that? And is that, again, something that this product can help normalize?
Well, I think lighting in general has been designed and is specified based on what's perceived as the greatest common good. What provides the benefit for the greatest number of people?
Sure.
And it doesn't allow for taking individual preferences and needs into account. So this is an area of concern, particularly in things like commercial and office lighting. And the federal government's actually doing research on determining optimal office lighting. And the current thinking, it's not yet a design guideline or recommendation, but the current thinking is to diminish the intensity of overhead lighting in offices by 2/3 and rely just on light coming through the windows, and give everybody a task lamp where they can choose the light bulb and then dim it to their level of preference. So you provide the necessary light for the environment, which can obviously be tuned up in the case of an emergency to full intensity, but I'll give people the ability to create individual light environments to suit their preferences.
Wow, that's really a very good point. The ability to customize that based on what they've got going on individually. That's really cool. So, Jill, I'm wondering if you could also just shed a little bit of information as far as your connection to Brilli, how Brilli kind of came to be, and, on a personal level, why you're, really connected and committed to this company.
Sure. So the founders actually have been working on this sort of beautiful light technology for quite some time. If you think back to early LEDs, the light spectrum was pretty awful and people did not like the light. And so really figuring out how to beautify the light spectrum was sort of core to the initial innovation. And then as more research around the impact of indoor light on our circadian health began to emerge, our founder, John Gosha, really decided it was time to sort of pivot and take some of that light beautification technology and really try to figure out how can we make healthy lighting that's also beautiful, that people want to live with and have in their homes. And so that's kind of where the new technology came from. And it's fascinating when you think about the early days of the company. We had our scientific advisory board's pretty amazing. We've had a lot of great input on getting the light spectrum right from former heads at GE and Osram. Obviously, we've been talking to Doug, our passionate neuroscientist. But we're also working with heads of, working with Dr. Shadab Rahman over at Harvard Sleep Lab. It's just really exciting times, to be sort of early in this concept of getting our light right so that we can, live healthier lives. And I think that's why I'm really committed to this cause, because I think, we've really thought about sort of sleep and health through the lens of comfort for a long time. If we could just get the right mattress, if we could just get the right temperature, if we could just get the right softness. But we haven't paid much attention to the physiology of sleep and the importance of making sure that everything is sort of biologically aligned. And so, with light playing such a large role in our circadian rhythms and our body's ability to wake up and to fall back to sleep every day, this just seems like that piece that's been missing from the health and well-being conversation.
So well said. And actually on that point, what is the meaning behind the name of the company?
So Brilli is it's actually from the Urban Dictionary. It's Brilli is slang for brilliant.
I love that. That is just perfect. It is brilliant. And Doug, I was wondering if you could just share what has you be committed on this topic? Why does this topic move you? What makes it worth your time?
Well, there's a couple of things. I, earlier in my career, worked at 3 different pharmaceutical companies. And I was most recently in the neuropharmacology department. And I was involved in developing drugs to treat neurological and psychological issues, everything from appetite control to stroke to psychosis, depression, schizophrenia. And I when you work in the pharmaceutical industry, you get up close. You get a chance to see all the problems with drugs and medications. A lot of them have side effects. A lot of them have a problem with compliance, which means people stop taking them.
Right.
And other things. And the thing that really struck me was that about 85% of all drugs used in children have never been tested or approved by the FDA for children. So I think that one of the things that really hooked me was relating to migraine headache and use of light for headache, because right now there are about 18% of all girls and 13% of all boys suffer from chronic migraine headache, which is defined as 15 days or more a month of incapacitating headaches of 5 hours or longer. And so what happens is parents of these children see them suffer, don't have a good way to treat them. You can't give them adult strength drugs. And to be honest, a lot of parents give their children a double adult strength dose of NyQuil every morning and send them off to school. And there just has to be a better way. And, I've done measurements in schools. The light is usually an afterthought. It's one of the last things that's installed in a school. So it's already working out of a diminished budget. You've got bad spectrum. You've got, a lot of flicker, a lot of glare. And so I'm very interested in alternatives to drugs, and light has the benefit of being completely safe in children. It's much easier to continue using it, to comply with it if it's just a light bulb. One interesting thing is no lighting effect causes tolerance. So if you think of drugs like opiates, addicts need to take more and more and more to get the same boost. Well, light, nobody develops tolerance to light. The dose that works today is the dose that'll work a year from now. Right. So I just think that light is the way to go. And what I like about the approach that Brilli is taking is it's going straight to the consumer. We may not be able to treat migraine and other headache conditions in schools, but by golly, we can sure treat them in the home. And I'm sorry, I take that back. We don't treat them. We simply offer a lifestyle choice that people can use that may be effective for a child in experiencing less distress. So we are not marketing a treatment. We're providing a lifestyle alternative.
Wow. No, that is really well said, because I can hear in your sharing between the both of you that you see the results of bringing this in for people, and just that this is not just about a light bulb. This is about a whole lifestyle, and really being on the cutting edge of what's possible, in upcoming years, to really start to bring more and more people into this conversation, that this actually really could be a big part of, piece of the puzzle around why we're having these, chronic problems with our sleep, with our health, with our mental, faculties, with so many areas of our life. And that, this is a very, for many years, overlooked or misunderstood topic, just many people just didn't know. And it's really an exciting time. And, I'm really grateful that you guys were able to take the time to help educate and to create a product that can help people bring this in more regularly. That is one of the number one problems I find when I'm working with people here at Sleep is a Skill is, I'm very light fanatical and, we'll talk about this topic to ad nauseum, and yet people want to know, okay, so just how can I bring it in? How can this happen on a regular basis in my environment? And to be able to point them in the direction of something like this is really exciting. So thank you for what you're doing.
Happy to contribute.
Awesome. And, I want to just thank you again for taking the time to be here, to share all of this. And where can people find out more about you? Where could they purchase some of these, options that you have for lighting? How does the whole process, what does that look like?
Well, at the current time, Brilli products are available through the Brilli website. Okay. Yeah. Great. Perfect. Okay. So really, if they were to go to the Brilli website, that is where all their questions can be answered. And by the way, that's how I was connected with you guys, and the customer service was incredible. The website is beautiful, and there's actually a lot of information on there to just learn, if you want to geek out a bit more on this topic and get some nice visuals, absolutely check that out. And it's at bbrilli.com. Well, thank you again. I really do appreciate the time, and looking forward to hearing more as you guys continue, in the industry. Maybe we can get kind of a part 2 down the road and, go further on the science topic. Definitely. Thank you very much.
Thank you. You've been listening to the Sleep is a Skill podcast, the #1 podcast for people who want to take their sleep skills to the next level. Every Monday, I send out something that I call Molly's Monday Obsessions, containing everything that I'm obsessing over in the world of sleep. Head on over to sleepisaskill.com to sign up.